I am 60 years young in recovery, and I have been in recovery. Actually, my recovery date is December the 10th, 1991. So I have a very, very special anniversary coming up this December. It'll be 30 years in recovery and full circle for my own personal growth and development. So I think this year is kind of special and unique for me right now.
Beautifully said, Jody. And thank you so much for joining us today. So, we'll start at the beginning. Can you talk about your childhood? Did you experience any kind of trauma? Was it good, bad, ugly, indifferent? Let's talk about that.
Well, my childhood, I'm one of six children. I'm the only girl with five brothers, and I'm the second oldest. And I did have two parents. My dad, who is deceased now, I'm happy to say that he did pass away sober. But during our childhood, those were some very challenging years, especially as things had gotten really progressive with his alcoholism and his addiction. And my mom, although she never was a chemically dependent woman, but as I have grown and learned and understand now, it was definitely a lot of codependency. And being a child of uh, addiction in her own family, and I recognize that a lot. How my parents were the perfect storm.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So, growing up, did you experience any personal trauma?
I had a, a sexual assault from a family member, and because it was not um, addressed and handled um, in a way that I know today to be handled and responded from parents who love their children and nurture and care for their children would have responded, and it left me very vulnerable, and it left me also opened for more, and it
Mm.
did, and it happened continuously for the next 2 years, from the age 13 to 15, until I got pregnant. I got pregnant at 15 years old by a family member. And I realized that the only way I was going to make this stop is I had to take matters into my own hands. And I think that was the first time that I found my voice. And it was through a time in the season when I took a knife and I put it in my pants, and I would carry it with me all the time, 24/7. And I said to myself, if anybody ever tried to hurt me again, that I was going to make it stop. And I remember when the next time came, as I always knew it would, although I didn't have to use it, but at least me having it showed the sincerity that no more.
Yeah,
Enough was enough.
right.
And I think that was the day I realized I had more power than I ever knew I had. And I just needed to stand up for myself for the first time, because nobody could help me, nobody was helping me. And that's when it stopped. But um, I still was pregnant, but I was determined to graduate with my class. And I did. And I remember the first time I had a breakdown in school, trying to live this normal life, teen life, going to school, and here it is, I'm taking care of a baby at 15 years old, 16 years old, and the nature of all of the stress that went around in my mind and what I was dealing with, and people talking about me and laughing at me, and always talking about, oh, she had a kid by her, you know.
Yeah.
And so I had to learn very early in life how to find my own way to survive.
Sounds
But the
like it.
biggest thing was that I walked across that stage and I got my diploma, and my mom had my son in the audience.
Oh.
Then I ended up getting pregnant again, and I realized that during that time, the trauma and the drinking and the using is really getting more aggressive. And so the young man, not young man, he was a neighborhood who would grow up, who I grew up with in the community. He was 10 years older than me. He was always so good to my kids. He was good to, especially to my daughter. She was only 9 months when we got together, and we did finally get married. It started with domestic violence and it ended with domestic violence for the next 10 years. Drinking, drugs, and domestic violence.
So, what drugs were you guys using together?
Well, before I met him, the only thing drugs I used was, because the drug of choice for me was drinking and marijuana if it was available.
Right.
I was a social drug at that time. But my husband at that time, who is now deceased, um, introduced me to cocaine. And there would be the beginning of a whole new journey of now a whole nother life.
So, can you share a couple of significant stories of your addiction? Kind of just to, tell us where you were at, where your mindset was at.
I was always in conflict. I was always living a life in conflict, is because I wanted to be a good wife. I wanted to be a good mother, and I wanted to be a good woman. However, it just never jived. It never jived. And trying to be Martha Stewart lifestyle Monday through Thursday, and I could do that. But when Friday came, I had a totally different personality. My favorite slogan was "Sister has desires," and I will wake up knowing it's Friday, and I have accommodated everybody's needs. I have did this for the family and for the kids. I just want one day for myself.
Right.
And of course, that would be the one day that I ever wanted that, I could not have my needs met. And so I stopped looking for people to fulfill my needs for Friday, and I would fulfill them myself. And, and up pops trouble and consequences, and trouble and consequences, and trouble and consequences, and trouble and consequences, which build up to, over those years of time, of 5 DUIs. And the first two, I did short jail times for and fines. But then 3, 4, and 5, as time went by, I hadn't even gone to court for 3 and 4, and I had just got a 5th one. So between DUI number 3 and DUI number 5 is when I did try to get clean and sober, and I went to my first AA meeting. My mother took me. I never forget it. And I sat there very quietly, and I just listened. I didn't do anything. And I tried going a few times, and then I says I want to go. And so I get to a week to my year of sobriety. Now during this time, my ex, who is now deceased, sees that I'm really getting serious about getting clean and sober. And he doesn't want to get clean and sober. He wants to continue to use. And so now things are changing now. Now, how I'm acting in the house and behaving in the house, and I'm not using, and I'm going to meetings. And I start having Bible studies. And I'm starting to pull my life together, and I want to go back to school now. So now he's bringing home half gallons of alcohol, and he's putting lines of Coke on the TV in our bedroom. And he's never done that before. And this was constant, constant. And I never forget the week to my year sobriety. I finally broke. But I'm gonna tell you, the next 18 months would be the next 18 months that was the living hell
Brought you to your knees.
that brought me to my knees in more ways than one. The Department of Children and Family Services went to the school and took my kids out of school, and how humiliating that was for my daughter, especially, and even to this day, will always be traumatized by that. Um, uh, a firebomb was thrown through my bedroom window because at, during that time, I told my husband I was finally tired and I wanted him to leave. And so that day, I walked out with the clothes on my back, but I also walked out with my daughter. And then that's when I knew I'm done. I did have to go to jail, and it was okay. I did lose my daughter, but that was okay. And I did get visitation rights after I did get out of jail. But the one thing that happened in jail, where I knew was this had nothing else to do with anybody else me getting clean and sober this time.
Uh-huh.
It's on that fifth DUI, and I fell to the floor, and I says I haven't even gone to court for 3 and 4, and here I am back for number 5. The kids are gone. The house is burnt down. Everybody in the community, I am an absolute living joke, and the family has nothing else wanting to do with me. And I just fell to my knees on the floor in that jail cell. And of course, when I look up and I see a razor blade, and so I grabbed this razor blade and I says, "You can end it all now, Jody. You know there's no way out. There's no way out of this. And there's nowhere else left to go." And it wasn't until I heard this voice in the back of my head says, "But it's not over till the fat lady sings the blues." And I took that razor blade and I threw it in that toilet and I flushed it. And I says, "I don't know what the future holds for me, but I know that the fat lady ain't singing the blues."
Right.
And I remember going in front of that judge. He didn't even want to see me. He says, "Just get her out of here." And I accepted that. I accepted it all. But for whatever reason, the officer came to me and says, "We're letting you out on a personal bond." And I like to die.
Yeah.
And I knew I could hear them all making bets. She'll be back. She'll be back. All I had was a black plastic bag. And when I walked out of Lorain County Jail, awaiting court dates for 3, 4, and now 5, all I had was a bus ticket in a black plastic bag. And when I got on that bus and I made it back here to Cleveland, I went straight to a meeting.
That was your turning point.
That was my turning point. My healing and my recovery had no longer to do with my abuser. It no longer had to do with my parents. It no longer had to do with the community. It no longer had to do with my husband. It had no longer had to do with my son. It no longer had to do with anybody. I knew that I was never turning back, no matter what happened in that courtroom. And it would be quite some time before I got a chance to see the judge. But guess what? I got there. I went to 7 meetings a week, and 2 of them on Friday.
Wow.
For a long time.
Yeah.
It took 5 years to get legal custody back of my daughter. And my son and I, we have a growing and healing relationship who is now 45. It's been a long road for healing.
Yeah, I bet.
And forgiveness.
So once you got sober, did you start addressing other issues, mental health issues, the trauma, that kind of thing?
That brings me to, for the first 13 years of my life in recovery, was 12-step meetings. And that's all I knew to do.
Right.
That's all I knew to do. And it worked. But now things are happening as I'm getting sober and as I'm getting clean. I couldn't understand why was I still feeling the way I was feeling and experiencing the things I was experiencing. And the water dam broke open is when I finally got into a relationship with a man who would then be my husband. After never being in a relationship with a man since my marriage for 13 years.
Right.
Trauma again. That whole world was opened up. Literally, probably within the first month of marriage. And I never dealt with any of the trauma from childhood. And it was opened up like somebody had came and severed a boil. And I was in full-blown post-traumatic stress, and everything with his severe mental illness triggered me, and it got so bad so quickly, very quickly, and it would be 13 years when I relapsed. Not only a moment of relapse from with I picked up a drink when my dad passed away, but I had an emotional relapse. And it was a very short season, but I said, I knew. I said, I took all my medications and his medications, and I said, I would rather die 1,000 deaths than to live like this. And when I woke up, I didn't know I would wake up. I said, well, if God saw fit to wake me up after all of that, what I took last night, it was for a reason. And that's when I went into the bathroom and I took me a shower and I put my clothes on. I put my shoes on and I walked to the nearest agency. I sat in the lobby and I says, I will not be leaving this agency today until I get help. And I did. And that would be when my world opened up to behavior health.
Oh.
When I first got my first counselor, and she encouraged me to go to NAMI, and I joined the NAMI family to family group. I cried for 12 weeks. I cried for 12 weeks. I never thought I would make it through because I was still married with him, but my focus wasn't him. It was me.
Right.
And getting back on track. And so it would be for the next 17 years now that I've been on the road to healing on another level. is because I never had an opportunity to deal with my mental health.
Right.
I never had an opportunity to deal with the childhood trauma. This was where I needed to be and I want to be. And ever since then, I've been incorporating trauma work in my recovery for women. And because you're you're always going to have a relapse, you're always going to have a breakdown, you're always going to have setbacks until you start doing this work.
Right.
And it's not a win. It's not if, it's when. It's because we don't never know what the trigger is going to be. And if you've never done the work and you're not taking your time to take care of yourself and to do the work, I have been so blessed to have some wonderful women put in my path. Beautiful women. I have surrounded myself, as I always have and always done in almost 30 years. I surround myself with women in recovery. And that is my story.
So a couple follow-up questions. What have you been able to do in recovery that otherwise wouldn't have been possible, especially focus on the last like 17 years?
Well, I have been the state trainer for NAMI peer to peer for 16 years. I only just retired from not doing state trainings in 2020 because I thought that was very significant.
Do you have any words of hope that you would like to share with somebody trying to get sober?
My words of hope would be to somebody trying to get sober is, I would say to them, like one of my sponsors said to me in early years, she put a mirror to my face and she says, "What do you see?" I, I said, "I see me." She says, "There lies the problem." And if we can just take a moment to look outside of ourselves, to focus on something that is working, because clearly this is not.
Right.
Focus on something that is working.
Yeah. Well, Jody, you covered a lot today and you have such an amazing story. Is there anything that I missed to ask you that you would like to share with us today before we leave?
Something that I would like to share. Yes, I would. I would like to share that one day my dream is to have a program, Serenity, where I want to invite people, especially women, to come have tea with me. And I want you to be able for us to say what we need to say and want to say around the teapot. Because what's said around the teapot stays around the teapot.
Well, I for one hope to be a part of this tea party for sure. That sounds awesome. And again, Jody, thank you so much for coming out and sharing your beautiful, amazing, crazy story with us. You are truly an inspiration and really a miracle. So I really appreciate you sharing your story. It's going to help a lot of people.
Thank you.